Hey guys, and welcome to another brand new video. In this video, I want to go and showcase up something actually really cool, which is actually pretty much the PlayStation's very first ever PlayStation 5 Slim console. Now, as you guys kind of know, there's a lot of really smart people out there, a lot of really cool, nifty DIY folks, and all that type of stuff, and sometimes they have a chance to go put together some of the coolest things out there. And this, we're going to be talking about and showcasing up the pretty much world's very first ever PlayStation 5 Slim console, which also in theory does go and work, is presentable, and is also kind of been making its ways and rounds all around the internet sphere as of right now. And for me, I'm someone, as you guys know, loves the PlayStation, loves these next-gen consoles, and at the end of the day, I do think a lot of these features are really cool, and it kind of does give us like that really cool concept that in the future, this actually could be possible. Now, I think you're like a lot of really big things usually do tie into, is it too small? Will all the features actually work? And is it possible to make it efficient, streamlined, and actually be utilized? And so far, apparently it's a really big yes. So I'm going to showcase up some of this stuff, show you guys some of the video itself, and at the end of the day, like I said, this is very nifty and cool. So make sure you guys are subscribed with the notifications on as well for the brand new PlayStation 5 giveaway. We have the Amazon links down below for the PS5 itself. We also have the Twitter and Twitch stream down below if you guys want to follow, and of course the Target links as well if you guys all get your own little consoles in the first place. So, we actually have, this has been kind of blown up on the whole internet storm, mainly because there hasn't really been too much crazy news going on. Hence why we still have the Einstein hair going on over here, because we're kind of just chilling until everyone goes and gets their consoles. But when it comes to this, we actually do have a good old DIY Perks who had a chance to go and showcase up probably one of the coolest things out here. So we've seen loads of articles, I'm going to show you guys up the video here in a second, but basically the actual good old wizard himself rebuilds this PlayStation 5 to less than actually being an inch wide. There is inevitably, and I would probably agree, going to be a PlayStation 5 Slim, at least because the current PlayStation 5 is shape and size, basically that of a Dubai skyscraper, and it is kind of a big little lofty boyo. But the one kind of cool thing was this one is that right now we're hearing rumors on the Pro, rumors on the Slim, but some people actually can go utilize the internals and rebuild it, basically take apart your PlayStation 5, rebuild it, resolder it, and essentially make their own proper consoles with that here too as well. So a lot of folks basically saying, hey, being slimmer than the current PS5 isn't really the world's biggest challenge, but more so just for such a width, like a big width, big height, and, basically it's pretty constrained when it comes to this one too. So with this, Sony actually has some pretty sticky-outy heat sinks and other cooling requirements, and a lot of other various internals that are just big. So think like the GPUs, think the CPUs, think about the console itself, think about the cooling, think about everything else tied on in, and well, obviously, when it comes to, well, a lot of big things with it. So for this, there's actually, and I want to showcase up a lot of this stuff over here, the world's very first ever PlayStation 5 Slim. So I'll probably have a nice little mutation over here, because we could showcase up a lot of stuff and talk over it. So you could see some of the older consoles that have had a chance to go and be kind of toned down and slimmed down when it comes to the consoles themselves. Or if you look at the normal pure PlayStation 5 console, it's a got a big juicy boyo. If you guys can even see mine up in real life, or if you guys have your own, it's kind of big and kind of a scary thing. But what's the best way to go and basically make it better? You take it apart, you get all the parts, and you kind of put it all together. So as you guys can kind of see a lot of this process, you could open up the actual chipboard itself and look through the PlayStation overall. You guys can actually see the proper CPUs, the proper specs in terms of everything, the motherboard itself, and if you go and take everything all apart, basically you could still reassemble all this stuff. You could do this for pretty much anything. Think a car, think a TV, think a console, think a phone. But of course, sometimes it's, number one, really hard to pull off, and number two, very efficient technology is kind of needed to go make this all go and happen. So as he goes and kind of slowly takes the stuff apart and trying their best to optimize more of the actual heatsink itself to make this whole board more efficient and slimmer, it's a pretty cool process. Because like I said, a lot of this internal stuff kind of does tie into more of the heatsink. Obviously, if you guys have a proper GPU, CPU, console, internals, it's going to get hot. You have a proper normal baseline PC and desktop, it's going to get hot. So what do you need to go and do to make it better? Liquid cooling, so basically make it a lot more fine-tuning, a lot more efficient, or as well have a way to go and spread it out a little bit more efficiently to help out the actual heat dissipation for the consoles themselves. So as he kind of goes through this entire process and kind of making this way more streamlined, it's insane to go and see just how thin and how much stuff you can basically take away to make these consoles more efficient. Now, will this ever be really worthwhile long term for Sony themselves to do this? Probably not. Because, if you can make, it's kind of like if you can make everything at a 90% efficiency rate and kind of pull out millions of them all the time, it's not as bad as making something 100% efficient, but it takes an extra, few hours, and you're making a lot less consoles all throughout the day. So basically, as I've kind of going through it and trying to make the console itself, it's a very, I'm going to skip through it, streamlined process to essentially make sure everything is efficient, everything is working well, and it's a lot of step-by-step basis to go and make sure that everything is all fine-tuned together. This is why the whole process is a very, very, first and foremost, crazy process, because it is all DIY. Know about all the internals, know about the actual specs, know about everything else tied on in. It's cool. Like, this is literally, as of right here, a fully rebuilt PlayStation 5 board. Like, you gotta admit, that's impressive. You gotta admit, that's a lot of preemptive work, and you gotta admit, the fact that it even turns on at the end of all this video is a very cool process. And they've had a chance to go and kind of streamline a lot more of this, because if you look at some of the stuff, like, say, the charging docks, or the other various internals, they're pretty small. Like, you can make, these are actually probably bigger and more wider than the actual consoles themselves. We even look at, say, the Xbox Power Brick 2 as well. So this is why it's almost even more impressive seeing all these cords and everything tied into it, because it's just such a crazy, crazy process. So, as I keep on trying to go and develop more and more into the actual DIY itself, it just goes to show that you have to be efficient. You got to make sure every few inches and every little speck of just inch you have is efficient when it comes to making the consoles themselves. It's very cool to look at the wiring, very cool to look at the powering, and basically just the, like I keep on saying, but the efficiency rate of all this. Now, you can actually kind of see some of the baseline console itself literally right here on the very, very bottom on the screen, where the console's like slowly actually finally starting to go take some part, and you can basically go now and start utilizing a lot more of this stuff to make the internal console a little bit better. Now, as he talks about the deep brain consoles is cool and all, but you mainly want to go and see the end result of all the internals for the console itself. And as you guys could probably go and tell, the liquid cooling is always the biggest, baddest part. Mainly because, as I mentioned, a lot of the actual internal cooling has been really rough to go make sure it's efficient and smooth. And this is kind of the big thing for us to look for, because you need the power, you need the efficiency of the power, as I've mentioned a bunch of times, and like just the end result looks beautiful. So you guys can see, this is pretty much the quote-unquote on the bottom, like left screen right over there. This is the very first working PlayStation 5 Slim, where the internal should still work with the power spec line over here too as well. And you guys could probably go and see the beautiful moment right here. We could actually see it being turned on and powered on in the first place. So you could first and foremost go and see, and like I mentioned many times, how efficient everything is in the internals. Where the internals are still the same, you can still see the internal, like, heat sink itself, you can see the motherboard itself very obviously, and the connection and everything else tied on in, and it still will work. And this is kind of just crazy that people have a chance to take all this stuff apart and make this happen. Because this is basically like reverse engineering up a proper PlayStation 5 console. So after all the drama itself, it's being turned on. We're seeing the heat sink being pushed on out. We're seeing the fans up and running. And will it possibly go and power on? And I'm sure you guys can see on YouTube Magic. Yes, you can see his magical, lovely face over here. This video is actually, like, if you kind of went through a lot of this stuff, very impressive. You guys can actually literally see over here that good old snazzy PlayStation 5 button popping on off, and after all this hard work, all this efficiency that I mentioned 100 times, did finally come together, and they did finally have a chance to go launch up the DIY of the very first ever PlayStation 5 Slim. So this is like, you gotta admit, whether you guys are into the whole DIY side or not, the fact that this is literally working, and the fact that all the HDMI and all the connectors actually do properly work, after you completely retake it apart and re-showcase it up too as well, you have to go and give some pretty big credit. This is like something I'm sure even someone who physically works at Sony and PlayStation themselves would probably have their own big issues with. And of course, this is why I think a lot of folks are kind of taking this like somewhat by storm, because who would imagine that you can go and just remake your entire PlayStation 5 console like that and have a chance to showcase up everything that happened and all the internals and movements when it comes to it itself. You guys can even see this is a lot of what would actually be inside your actual proper PlayStation 5 itself, as you guys also go look through the proper console. Like, that's a very, very slim boyo, and a very, once again, as I've said it 40 times, efficient console. So you got to give a lot of credit where credit's due in the fact that this actually even happened. The fact that you could literally go play games and they're launching and they're working and the UI itself is actually going on. You can literally see the Sony Interactive Entertainment it presents itself with the console overall. You gotta admit, that's a very, very cool, nifty thumbs up in my mind. So kind of give me your thoughts. Do you think this is cool? Do you think it's lame? Do you think it's kind of nifty that we actually had a chance to finally see the very first ever PlayStation 5 Slim out there in the wild? And as well, once again, very, very cool video idea to top on into this too as well. You could also go and see at the very tail end for DIY perks, and then I had a chance to go and showcase up all the nice proper heat as well. You guys can see like the heat on the RAM, heat and everything else too in the console itself in comparison to the normal consoles too as well, which, if you guys even look at all the actual heat side, is actually a little bit more efficient than even expected. So very, very cool and very cool to see. So give me your thoughts and comments down below. Twitter and Twitch room down below. Make sure you guys are sub for our PS5 giveaway. And overall, got to give a little bit of claps, or claps are due.